I'm a bit spoilt for choice here. We've got a lovely lighthouse over there and some horses there. I'm trying to do as many of my videos outside as possible while it's nice, because you need to touch grass sometimes. So I've got a question here, or a topic I guess, from Flame Lizard, who says, I would like to know your thoughts on wholesome or cozy games versus the thought of games being too comfortable in this genre instead of calling to change overall systems that are bringing people to want to escape into cozy games. What are your thoughts on this? This is a topic from my university course regarding games and politics, and it would be great to get to know your perspective on this topic. And I appreciate all the knowledge you're sharing. Thank you. Thank you, Flame Lizard. This is an excellent question, and one I've thought a lot about. Horse, what do you think about the cozy games discourse? Would you care to answer some questions for the channel? The kind of perspective you're talking about is this kind of critique of cozy games as sort of like an escape from kind of capitalism and all of the bad stuff in the world, and how that might be a bad thing because we shouldn't just escape from things, we should be encouraged to challenge them. And I think one of the best essays you can read on this topic is by my friend another doc called Doc Burford, and I will put a link below the video to this. I think you have to kind of do a history of this type of game generally. If you go back about 20 years or so, 15, 20 years, and you go back to like Zynga games and Facebook games, they used to call them tend and befriend games. So things like Farmville and even Animal Crossing would have been referred to as a tend and befriend game. And I've always enjoyed this type of game. I played Harvest Moon when I was a teenager. I used to download millions and millions of emulator ROMs when I was a teenager, and Harvest Moon was one of the only SNES games that I actually played for more than 5 minutes. Because the thing about downloading emulator ROMs is you just hoard hundreds of them and then play them all for 5 minutes. But Harvest Moon was one that really got its hooks into me. But you know, the history of these games, really, when you think about it, and this is something that people are often uncomfortable talking about, but they have historically been aimed at women, particularly the mobile phone ones as well. Whether you believe that is a nature or nurture thing, there is a thing in our society where we associate women with nurturing and taking care of people and being sociable, and men with being competitive and wanting to do fighting and all of that stuff. This isn't to say that one type of game is exclusively for one type of person and another type of game shouldn't be played by them or anything of that nature. And if you dig into the kind of sociology of online play, there's some really interesting stuff around that. Like I think it was Yi and colleagues in some of the early studies of World of Warcraft, they found that when men and women played MMOs, they tended to find that people started playing with typical gender preferences, right? So the men went in to conquer things and get treasure, the women went in to socialize and dress up their character, and then over time they would switch and gravitate towards the other thing, right? So what that kind of shows me, or what that kind of indicates broadly, is that our kind of gendered expectations of what boys do and what girls do sort of dictate what we feel comfortable initially doing, right? It doesn't actually dictate deep down in your heart what you really want to do for fun. I play RPG games because I like the relationships between characters and I like dressing up my character like a little dolly. Those are not typically sort of masculine behaviors. So I have to give you all of that preface because the stuff I'm going to say in a minute is going to sound a bit contentious, but you're getting dangerously close to eating your own poo. See, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. Cozy games present a rose-tinted view of the world. You never see a horse eat its own poo in a cozy game, do you? I think it's impossible to have a critique of wholesome games which doesn't factor in the fact that these are largely games made and enjoyed by either women or sort of queer audiences, so like feminine men and non-binary people and stuff like that. And I always think it's much more valid for fans to criticize something when it's something they like and not something they don't like. Because if you don't like cozy games and you're giving them this criticism, it's like, well, okay, do you levy the same criticism at the types of games you do like? For example, if I'm macho dude bro Call of Duty player guy and I say, well, I don't like cozy games because they're escapist fantasy and they don't help you solve problems in the real world, right? Am I then levying the same sort of criticism at the types of games I do like? Or am I basically actually saying, I like games where you solve problems by killing people and shooting bad guys, that's an okay fantasy, and these games where you kind of build communities and stuff, that's a bad kind of fantasy for some reason that I'm not quite sure, but it seems to mainly have to do with the fact that I just don't like these games in general, right? If you want to go down a sociology rabbit hole about this, there is a sociologist from the 1970s, French guy, Pierre Bourdieu, and Bourdieu wrote a lot about the sociology of taste. So why do people like what they like, and why do different groups of people seem to sort of build and maintain their identity based on what they like and what they don't like, right? The reason I'm saying this, and the reason why I think it might be a relevant way to look at the problem you're discussing, that kind of line of argument within sociology, the sociology of taste, it basically shows us how people attach their ethics to their aesthetics, right? So I like what I like because I'm better than you or smarter than you in some way, right? Which is kind of like the hipster attitude, right? Like, what I like is good because it requires me to have this particular set of intellectual skills and educational background, and that means that I'm better than you and what I like is better than what you like. This is kind of how people relate their ethics to their aesthetics. So I'm not necessarily saying that the critique of wholesome, cozy games is wrong per se, but I think if people are only levying at wholesome games and saying this is the bad kind of fantasy, and they're not levying it at like Dark Souls or Call of Duty or whatever thing they do like, then that to me means that what they're doing is not actually making a specific critique of that genre. They're just doing this thing of like trying to turn their aesthetic preferences, the type of game they prefer, into like an ethical argument about who's good and who's bad and all of that kind of stuff. Let's see if any of the others are going to be a bit more talkative. Excuse me, horse, would you like to share any opinions about cozy games? That one's got pink eye. I don't think there's inherently anything wrong with making cozy games. I think lots of people talk about it being a very repetitive genre because people make kind of farming the same kind of thing out over and over again. But that's just because that's a gameplay genre that works very well with the cozy mode. Like I said, it used to be called tend and befriend. Tending to something, maintaining it, looking after it, and then befriending people as both a mechanic and a story vehicle. Those things work. That's why we repeat them over and over again. When it comes to this kind of political question of is this a bad type of game because of the types of fantasies that it involves, with that kind of question you always have to ask yourself whether you're sort of singling out a particular audience and treating them like they're more stupid than other types of people, because that is kind of the general tone that I see in a lot of these criticisms of these kind of games. Nice quiet electric car this time. When you factor in the element that this is a type of game that is mostly made and played by queer people and women, then the usual critique of wholesome, cozy games kind of takes on a slightly different tone. It starts to feel a bit sort of patronizing and paternalistic. Like, oh, those silly softies are being manipulated by this game. Like the games I play aren't doing that. Just these silly softies that aren't real gamers. Their games are manipulating them, and they're not wise enough to know better.